this question I've been thinking a lot about from a kind of a markets perspective. Is would Russia decide to cut off oil and gas exports in response to Western sanctions to induce some kind of energy shock? This is from Hongma.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, when the SWIFT removal was first discussed, there was a lot of concern inside Russia that, and at least the Russians use this as a kind of not necessarily threat to the West, but kind of like a signal to the West that if you cut Russia out of SWIFT, Russian gas is not going to be able to enter European territory. And there were disruptions before the war in Yamal, the pipeline between Germany and Poland. And those disruptions looked like they were logistical, they were supply, but the timing of it with that statement was very interesting for a lot of people to suggest that Russia was already showing that it could use gas as a weapon in a significant way. 40% of European gas comes from Russia. Some countries it's significantly higher than that. Interestingly, there's no real correlation between, if you look at the list of percentage of countries in their dependence on Russian gas and their support for sanctions. That correlation is not really that there, but it's still an important factor in terms of how they approach their relationship with Russia. I think that right now the Russians were relieved that at least in the initial stages, the British did not suspend or impose punitive measures on Gazprom and Rosneft. They kind of left those out from the initial sanctions package, but they're watching quite closely the British Petroleum Rosneft saga that we're seeing now happen, where they're basically having to surrender those assets, right? Of $25 million. Is that going to be a one-off thing, or are more British and more European companies going to be following in that route? The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund has also cut $2.83 billion out of Russia and its investments, much of which are clustered in 50 different companies, but also in the energy sector. So if things stay as they are, and there's just like these kind of piecemeal crackdowns on Russian energy here or there, and there isn't a massive full-scale divestment from Russian gas, which is possible, because the alternative suppliers, Qatar, Azerbaijan, Algeria, Turkmenistan, they just don't have the bandwidth to supply it. Japan has not really taken action on moving LNG to Europe, like the Americans had requested. So it's possible that the Russians are not going to really use gas as a weapon in that scenario, but in a scenario in which there is a much faster divestment than we might expect from Russian gas, and new deals are signed with alternative suppliers that might have more potential than we initially planned for, and there's more crackdowns on investments like the BP issue or the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund's conduct, then I can definitely see Russia using gas in a much more weaponized fashion to try to catch the Europeans off guard.